Shadow of the Colossus was released 12 years ago in the West, 13 in Japan, and is the second game released for the PS2 by Team Ico. It's widely regarded as a cult classic, and for good reason. It was one of my favourite games growing up, and to be honest, it still affects how I view certain games that have attempted similar gameplay, like certain bosses in Castlevania Lords of Shadow and the larger enemies in Dragon's Dogma, which I may do a video on at some point, because that game is amazing and doesn't get enough love either. For those who are worried about spoilers, fear not. I'm only using footage from the first 3 Colossi, and I won't go into detail on the story outside of the first cutscene. Speaking of which, let's get started. The game opens with the main character, Wanda, travelling with a dead girl to a forbidden land on his horse Agro, where a spirit said to hold sway over the spirits of the dead resides. He arrives in a temple, and the spirit, calling itself Dormin, tells Wanda to seek out 16 Colossi and defeat them. Doing so will restore the girl to life. This is all the information you're given before you are handed the reins, literally, and go off to complete this quest. It feels very old school compared to a lot of games nowadays, which have long extended cutscenes detailing every last bit of the main protagonist's motivations and objectives. With Shadow of the Colossus, you're given minimal information and next to no dialogue, and yet it's still just as clear what Wanda's goal is. In fact, when I played the original game on the PS2, I did something very uncharacteristic of myself and actually skipped the cutscenes. Even without them, I still picked up on, at the tender age of 11, the story, Wanda's goals, and how contemplative the whole experience is. You go in excited to fight some giant beasts and come out the other side a changed person, because as the game goes on you start to become aware that, hold on, these giant monsters may not really be monsters at all, but just large animals. They don't tend to attack you first unless you provoke them in one way or another, but because you're the protagonist and you've been told what you need to do, you assume that what you're doing is the right thing to do. For 2005, this game was very much ahead of its time in terms of making a statement about what we expect as a player from a game's storyline, something that later games like Spec Ops: The Line would later also comment on. When it comes to gameplay, Shadow of the Colossus is unlike anything else, even today. As I mentioned earlier, a few games here and there have attempted to replicate the feeling of scaling such huge beasts and bringing them down, but none have quite managed to achieve it. You'll always start each attempt at taking down a Colossus in a huge open world, and I mean huge, especially for what was originally a PS2 game, which is mostly empty save for the odd bird or lizard. There's next to no sounds here except the sounds of the wind and nature, making you feel very isolated and focused on the task at hand, locating the next Colossus. Using your sword, you shine sunlight off it and the beams focus when you're aiming in the right direction. Once at your target, the game almost becomes a skill-based puzzle game, as you have to first work out how to get onto the Colossus and then how to get to its weak points, as you learn quickly there is almost always more than one. The real fun comes not only from working out how to finally climb a Colossus, but also from putting that plan into action. Some require some real skill and intelligent usage of the environment to put the Colossus into a vulnerable state ready for you to clamber up. Each Colossus is totally unique and requires a different plan to scale, and has weak points in completely different places to the others. This keeps the game from getting stale, as each new fight feels fresh and different from the last. Other than that, there isn't really much to go on in terms of gameplay. It's quite bare bones when you think about it, but where Shadow of the Colossus really shines, and the main reason it's become a cult classic, I would say, is the presentation. Now, the real reason you're here. What makes the PS4 version any different from previous versions? Well, first of all, the game has been redone from the ground up. All the textures, environments, and models look absolutely gorgeous on the PlayStation 4, and the lighting has been vastly improved over the PS2 original. Additionally, there are some quality of life improvements, like the ability to now pause the game and save anywhere instead of being limited to the healing prayer shrines dotted around the map. And the new resolution makes it much easier to see the lizard and fruit collectibles that increase your stamina and health respectively. There's also a new photo mode, which, while not as in-depth as a lot of other games' photo modes like Shadow of War and Mad Max, is actually still quite good. You know a developer's confident in how their game looks when they give you a photo mode to play around with. Despite being redone from the ground up, it still feels like the PS2 original in terms of the physics of the game and the climbing mechanics. When a Colossus tries to shake you off, Wanda will flop around like a persistent spider attached to your clothes, just as he did in the original. And all the movements of the characters are identical to the original. Absolutely nothing has been lost in translation. You still feel like a tiny bug taking on a giant human. And it is incredible. Taking down one of these monsters feels amazing. the sense of accomplishment when you finally work out how to climb them, when you take them down, everything about this game just feels amazing. Ultimately, if you've never played Shadow of the Colossus before, the PS4 version is the best way to experience this classic and see for yourself why it has the status it does in video game culture. If you have played it before, then there isn't really anything new here for you besides the odd new Easter egg. But do you really need an excuse to play this beautiful, haunting, incredible game again? Sony aren't even charging full price for it. Its recommended retail price is $29.99, so it's barely more than the cost of a big budget indie these days. What are your thoughts on Shadow of the Colossus? Do you love it? Do you disagree with popular opinion and hate it? How can you hate it? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Any thoughts on what I can do to improve my videos is welcome, as I want to bring you the best content I can. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.